Whenever I speak with someone, I learn something. I gain additional insight and I see the world, albeit temporarily, through another's eyes. Thereafter, it stays with me somehow, this vision, perspective, or approach. I sometimes feel the reasoning behind it, especially when there is a defining principle involved. And when those thoughts appeal to my passions and ideas, they solidify all the more. Drab is unpredictable. He sees the world through his target. He has a goal he wishes to achieve. For the purposes of our talk, the goal we relate to here is the promotion of the Wheel of Time, both as a show and as a series of books. He has fixed opinions on how social media platforms can be used to further this agenda, and he is critical of supposed gatekeepers, the popular public profiles that seek to push people off a particular platform and onto their pages to generate clicks and cash. He understands it, of course. He just doesn't like it, because it deters from the goal, the promotion of a body of work, which, when understood properly, will help the reader or viewer become more in tune with the morality of the medium. The Wheel of Time is an expansive world of diversity that seeks to highlight the benefits of inclusion above self-aggrandizement. Drab can be very colourful in his observations and use of similes. Thank you, Drab. It's always a pleasure to listen to your thoughts. So here we go. Drab, thank you very much. You're back again, a lot quicker than we thought, actually, last week. So I'm really grateful for your repeat showing.
It's great to be here, Zach.
So just in case anybody doesn't know, nobody knows really, except for Drab and I. But basically, I screwed up last week, and with my mic settings, and it was so bad, the audio on my end, that I couldn't actually, with any sort of correct conscience, put it up as a podcast with Drab. And so therefore, he has very graciously accepted the invitation to come and not quite repeat, but do another show with me. So I'm very, very grateful for that, Drab. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we get to do it correctly this time.
Yeah, hopefully. I'll keep my fingers crossed. But we talked about some very interesting things last time out, and I may actually put in some of your comments from last week anyway, because I think a lot of your points were very much on point or on target, as it were. But just to get into it then, Wheel of Time, season 1. Yeah, what would you say?
Glad that it's here. I've been telling myself to always talk about the Wheel of Time in the present tense instead of the past tense. Like, instead of saying I watched the Wheel of Time, I say I watched the Wheel of Time. And, I'm glad it's here.
Yeah, you're doing so following your Twitter feed, you're doing a rerun through, aren't you? You're going through each episode again at the moment. And last week you sort of said that if you wanted to sort of deep dive into it, this is the kind of thing that you would do. Are you diving deeply into the Wheel of Time as we speak?
Right now, I'm just rewatching, but I'm trying to think about the way I present the series on Twitter. And I think right now I'm just putting out the episode titles in a thread. And then I think once I get to episode 8, then I'll start making a thread of each one of the tweets in the thread.
Okay, all right. So you're creating a kind of expansive sequence, which essentially tells the story of each episode, but not necessarily as episodes in themselves, but as part of an overall larger thread, as it were.
Yeah, I want to go into each scene and each cut and really dissect the entire series and then go back and reference the book series within the same sort of thread.
Yeah, and what are you trying to achieve through doing that? As in, are you trying to achieve a greater sort of synergy between the written material and the TV show, or is there some other intention that you wish to exhibit?
I think the platform of Twitter is very I forget what the word is, but it's not a good reference material. Like it's constantly updating, and the past is moving quickly away from us. And so I want to make a sort of reference material that, since I'm always adding to it, then it'll continue to be relevant, and then a good reference because it's always going to be recurring on my feed. So when season 2 starts, I could go back to my season 1 thread and then quickly run through it and reference what I'm looking for, like within the application.
Okay. I mean, how does it, we established last week that you are at least a Twitter expert in comparison to me. Whether or not you would accept that particular moniker, I don't know. But so, if you let's say you started the sequence and then in, I don't know, 2 months' time, you come to add the final touches. Throughout that period of time, you would have amassed a certain number of likes or a certain number of viewings of your various tweets. How does that amplify the design of what you are doing over a period of time? As in, does that provide it with a greater amount of awareness, or as in, do more people get to see it as a result?
It's kind of counterintuitive and kind of cheating, like at the same time, because if I made a thread like that and it had been up for a year or whatever, and I saw a mistake, then I would probably copy the content of all of the tweets that are like downstream of it, and then delete the whole thing and remake it without the error in it. But the thing is, Twitter doesn't, it's not as cumulative with Twitter as I think what you're saying. Like I can't store up value in a thread and then try to profit from it later. It's not that conservative. The only value of the thread would be the content and not the likes or the engagement or whatever.
Okay, all right. So it wouldn't necessarily then accumulate, because when I see lots of different threads written by people, and there are always different numbers of likes per tweet. So if you've got a thread of like 10 tweets, then normally the original tweet gets the most number of likes. And then there are sort of disparate levels throughout the thread. Over time, does this not also build up in these cases through what you might be doing?
It would. I just really, what I'm doing is more like for myself, and then hoping other people will be in that mindset to take advantage of it later. But really, it's just a place on the internet to organize my thoughts. So I can always have new content come out on my Twitter feed that other people would see, and I would want, like, well, I hope this gets viral, but then it would also be connected to a thinking process that I have ongoing. So it's more for my own advantage and then for reference.
Okay, all right. So as you watch, to keep it in the present, the Wheel of Time. Um, yeah, what bits do you like the most? What bits do you look at, or are you currently viewing and thinking, I'm looking forward to that scene because you know what's coming?
I think the things I value the most are the dialogue, because that's the closest the show can get to like a book, is the actual text of the words that they're saying. And then after that, it would be the on-screen presence of the book component. So like if Rand is on screen, then I can write down Rand, and that makes sense in terms of referencing the book. Whereas if there's a plant behind Rand, I don't want to go into Prague like encyclopedias on what those plants might be and then write down the name. So I'm not that interested in some of the content of the visual like screen. Like some of that is not important to me, and then some parts are important to me, and those parts that are important are the things that are directly um, referenced in the books.
Okay, all right. And sort of scenes wise, or plot line wise, what are your sort of favorite bits so far from the series?
The combat is fun because I've always read the books as like I couldn't really I couldn't really imagine what they were doing because I'm not a sword fighter or whatever. But it
All right.
felt really fun. But now watching the combat is fun. I also like the scenery and like the texture of their clothing and the buildings and the nature elements. I was recently uh, reading an article about sound, and the sound designers were like, "Oh, we really love the horses because it connected everything." They were saying in other projects they were on, they would use automobiles to connect the sound. Like the automobiles are outside and you're inside, or you're walking down the street and the automobile goes by. But they said that they really used the horses in the Wheel of Time to connect everything, and that sort of flavor and texture, the sound and the visual, like what they're wearing and eating, and the sort of dirt on their face, that sort of stuff is really enjoyable for me.
Okay, all right. Um, but the storyline elements, because there are lots of parts or um, sort of additional plots or twists, I should say, which the books don't have. And this was, I've read in some sort of blog posts that this was in some way to provide a more dynamic explanation for some of the characters' moods or personalities. So, for example, I suppose with Matt, he's a bit blasé. And yeah, yeah, it doesn't matter. Money comes, money goes. That kind of thing in the books, but there's no real basis for that character development within the books, some people say, and so therefore having this having him presented as the child of a troubled marriage with sort of gambling issues will help to further, shall we say, explain his behavior later on in the story. Obviously, Perrin is very, very clear what kind of a detour they took there. Do you see that with their storylines?
For me, I've always read the books in a more schematic sort of way, so the characters aren't necessarily present to me in a I guess for me, the characters are very much like Dungeons and Dragons, like lawful evil and then chaotic good. So it's a schematic. It's not so much the narrative that they're going through or how I would treat them if I were in the same room. Whenever I see their behavior, I'm like, this is part of the schematic. And for me, looking at the characters in the show and then looking back at the characters in the books, they follow the same sort of schematic that the author was intending to have running in the background, where Rand has these friends over here and those friends over there, and they're different. And the difference between them is something that Rand contemplates and uses to make his own decisions. So Egwene and Nynaeve are in balance with each other, and then Perrin and Mat are in balance with each other. And then all four of them in this sort of balancing act inside of Rand's head helps him make the decisions that move the plot forward. And that happens in the books, and then it happens exactly the same way in the show. So if Mat is acting idiosyncratically like different, like if his emotions or his personal history isn't exactly the same, it really doesn't matter to me because he's fulfilling the same purpose for the story, which is to help Bran and to move the plot forward.
Mm. Okay. Um, but do you think that Rafe took this approach because clearly with a TV series, you don't have the length of time that a book would give you to develop characters, especially with a kind of series that has only 8 parts to it. So they had to really deliver the sort of background to these characters and the reasons why they're um, so willing to get up and leave, as it were, to break with this this lifestyle, which is the only thing that they've ever experienced. Because normally, I guess under normal conditions, it would be extremely rare for practically the entire next generation of the more prominent families within a village to just get up and go. So therefore, by having these different backgrounds, the show producers gave us some form of realism to what was going on there.
For me, the argument between what the fans want and what the showrunners want is very much like the argument between Egwene and Rand, the ongoing argument with Egwene and Rand in the series. I'm trying to think of a way not to spoil the series.
It's really hard, isn't it?
So Rand is all about him, like, this is my idea. I want to start with my idea and then finish my idea. And then Egwene is like, there's all these things that you have to take into consideration. Why don't we use what we have and build on top of that? And so the fandom is very much like, why don't you use the books and build on top of that? And but from a showrunner's perspective, there's a process involved doesn't start that doesn't necessarily start with the books. So you start with an analysis of everything that you have, and then you break that down into a system, and then you look at your show and you start from the bottom in a process that is a synthesis. So you start with the books over here, do an analysis, then you're done, then you start over with something new, and you synthesize all of the parts that you got from your analysis into something new from the ground up.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So Perrin's character, we can see from pretty much the first episode on, he's carrying baggage. He's carrying, I suppose, a lot of guilt, but there's also some kind of hidden communication or secret communication between Nynaeve and Perrin, which a lot of people have sort of drawn conclusions from, but we don't really know. But there's some kind of issue pre-existing issue between Perrin and his wife before she's unfortunately killed in the first. Is it? I can't remember if it's the first or the second episode.
First step.
It's the first episode. Okay. What do you think that's all about? A lot of people have alluded to perhaps some maybe a miscarriage has occurred previously, and that's why Nynaeve is aware of it, or maybe there are some other underlying issues. Some people have suggested that it's connected in some way to Egwene. Where do you see that particular drama? Do you think they'll make more of it? I mean, there's not much time, is there? It's not a soap opera.
So that's funny that you say that, because I've totally heard people say that the Wheel of Time is a soap opera because it never ended. And like in the beginning, it didn't end, but now that it's ended, you can't call it that anymore, I guess. So with Layla, we can see the pregnancy thing, I think, is overblown because that was a pinky grab moment. There's 3 pinky grab moments in the first episode. One of them is at the forge, one of them is in bed, and then one of them is when she's dying. So we can see a continuity here that Layla loves Perrin very much, through this gesture of this repeating gesture, whether he's awake or asleep, whether he can feel her squeeze his pinky or not. She is definitely in love with him, and definitely not a dark friend. Or I really don't think the pregnancy thing or miscarriage or whatever makes a lot of sense. The
Okay.
Nynaeve component of this, including like the insinuations of Egwene being involved, seems like drama that Nynaeve is just so starved for romance in her life. She's living vicariously through her friends. It seems like this is singularly a Nynaeve problem. We see that not only in the first episode with her being like, oh yeah, well, you know, you need to go home to your wife, you know, and he's just like, whatever. I think Perrin is hard to read, and people have a difficulty understanding where he's coming from, which is exactly like the books. And I think that Perrin is probably hesitant and doesn't have a lot of confidence in his marriage or, you know, his love life, which, you know, it just seems like he's like, oh, I don't know what's going on, I'm doubtful about everything. The only thing he really knows is that he loves his friends. And like, that's where Perrin seems the most relaxed and easygoing and confident, is when he's with Rand and Matt. And I guess, and with Egwene too. So that circle of friends of Matt, Egwene, Perrin, and Rand, and then the addition of like their leader Nynaeve, that's what makes Perrin confident. And then, you know, the Nynaeve comments about Egwene, that's that sort of love life with Layla and being a professional in the town with money or whatever, that's not where he's confident.
Okay. I am intrigued to see at what point they introduce Fail, because yeah, as we know, the level of guilt that Perrin is currently exhibiting, it's not really conducive to the creation of a meaningful relationship thereafter. But they don't have much time in which to introduce her, and she is quite a big character within the story, because if for no other reasons than her family connections are pretty heavy too.
As far as Vale goes, I don't think she should be introduced until Perrin has that coming out moment of being a wolf brother. He's kind of played with wolves a little bit so far in the series, but the reason why Perrin and Layla happen in episode 1 is because it didn't seem right in the show to have Perrin killing white cloaks. So they had to have that killing, and the killer Perrin has to appear somewhere in the first season. Where's Perrin going to kill? How is Perrin going to kill? Um, and that had to happen in the first season. Now we're going into the second season. Perrin needs to kill with uh, authority. I want to say he needs to authorize himself to kill, and that needs to happen before he meets Vale, because he has violence and then he has non-violence, and they're out of whack, and then he adds violence again, in this sort of return, this third part of the trilogy, the violence returns, and then it comes out and it's wild, and it needs to be balanced, and Fail becomes that balance, and that's when I think that character is going to show up.
Okay, all right, and Hopper. I mean, we clearly see Hopper survive the encounter with the White Cloaks. So this also kind of changes that particular narrative, which is not a problem because, Hopper, he maintains that the role there as teacher and guide throughout, practically throughout the book series as well. But in this way, with Hopper staying alive, it changes things a little bit, doesn't it? But also, how do you think they're going to show the communication? There was a very silent communication when Hopper licked Perrin's wounds. And the wounds heal, do they not? Or at least a little bit. Yeah. Is there a certain magic there then that we're looking at? Because that wasn't really there in the books.
So in the show, we have two people with significant injuries from Trolloc poison. One of them is Moraine and one of them is Perrin. Moraine has Lan do some field medic stuff on her, and that's a weak beginning. And then we have Nynaeve come in with a stronger reconsideration of her wounds, and then finally Moraine gets Aes Sedai healing, which is what she needed. Her wound was more significant. Perrin's wasn't as significant, but he did nothing in the beginning, and then he got the lick from the wolves. So I think the wolves have some sort of in the show, the wolves have some sort of shadow spawn capabilities, whereas in the books they simply have their hatred. And since they couldn't express the hatred of the wolves for shadow spawn, they had to manifest it some way in the show. And I think that sort of magical healing is going to make more sense in a visual context. And I don't think we're ever going to see the wolves talk. It's probably going to be like Perrin sees a wolf in real life, and that's the signal that he's going to go into the dream world that night. So we'll see the live wolf, and it won't, it'll probably, in my mind it's Hopper, but in the show the wolf probably won't have a name. But it'll probably be like a visual signal. Perrin is walking and sees a wolf in real life, and then that'll signal to the viewer or the audience, we're going to get a dream sequence tonight.
Also, there was no Elias Makera, unless I'm mistaken. It's going to be, it would be interesting if Elias comes in at some point, and maybe they because in the books Elias warns Perrin to stay out of Telar and Riod or the Wolf Dream. But it'll be interesting to see whether or not they actually use Elias as a kind of guide for Perrin in the TV show, and thereby giving the Wolf Dream voice other than Perrin's.
I think you say Elias, I just say Elias.
Sorry, yeah, go for it. I have no idea how these pronunciations work. I always used to say Kerheen, but it's Kyrian, so yeah.
I think I say it a little bit more like you, but
okay.
I say Elias, and that looks like a prime cameo role, like a
Okay.
really an expensive actor. Uh, Whoever they get would appear um, in between when Perrin is getting into some dangerous experimentations and before Perrin fully manifests his power and becomes like, you know, the the powered up end game character for the last book.
Hmm. Okay. All right. Uh, we haven't talked about Rand much, but that's fair enough. I mean, I think he's very muted in this TV show so far. He has a few frustrated outbursts, but that's all we really see from him.
No, 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 no.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, okay, he does have a few jokey sessions with Dana and so on. But he's generally speaking quite negative. But obviously you're going to disagree with that. So please tell me where
Well,
my
no, like
recollections are wrong.
that that was his that was Rand's line in one of
I am.
the
Okay.
he goes, no, 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 no. I just thought it was so funny that like I was like, oh, that's Rand. That's totally Rand. He would just go around screaming no. Uh but yeah, he seems all over the place in the first season. Uh
Hmm. I mean, he's past puberty, so it's not that clearly because the TV show they've made
yeah.
these characters a bit older than the books. Um,
But Rand is kind of like the homeschooled kid of the group where he might be smart and uh he might be able to show affection, but group dynamics aren't his strong suit, I guess.
hmm.
Uh, he
But he's got
seems
a
fun. Really, the first season was all about Moraine, so you couldn't just have Rand the White Savior, like main star of the show season one. He had to just be in the background, and he got to tell his jokes. He got to be a whiny like tantrum thrower. He got to be the resolute action taker. Um, he got to be the tortured soul. He got to be everything you'd expect from Rand in a book or a season. I'm overall satisfied with him.
yeah. I love the show. I think it's brilliant.
He should have better hair. Like he really should have better hair.
Look, I can't complain. Yeah, I'm just happy to have a little bit of hair left. So I'm not going to start complaining about Rand's hair. But no, I love the show, and I think all of the elements are intriguing. I'm trying to work things out a little bit because I was left a bit bemused by the final episode, in a sense that and I haven't watched it back again. So you've watched this several times, so you definitely have the benefit of that of more greater wisdom than I do. Um, but for example, with regards to the last episode, without revealing any particular details, but at some point he has to join up with Lan again. I mean, who's going to teach him the sword? Because so
I don't
far
know.
we've seen no training, and I don't
He
know.
sucks. He sucks really. Yeah, and we've seen him suck with the sword too. He gets it like stolen, and he sucks with the sword. Uh, maybe in season two he'll get the challenges that we saw, like in Camelin. We saw him
Mm,
uh, dealing with people who recognized what kind of sword he had,
mm,
and then along the way, people coveted the sword. So I think the stuff from Rand and the sword from book one is going to come into play in season two, where people are going to recognize that he has the sword. People are going to challenge him, and then we're going to start to see a little bit of tavern action come along where he just happens to have the sword out and win in the sword fight or whatever. So maybe see some white cloaks, maybe see some political factions, and then we're going to see him pull the sword out a few times.
Mm. Who's gonna guide him away from his first mistake? Is it going to be Tom? Do you think Tom's going to teach him, or will Lan and Warren catch up with him?
It's a good question. I mostly I've been wondering how mostly I've been wondering how is Rand gonna fight the Dark One. I haven't really thought about it. Is he good? Because he's never like there's all these scenes where they show him being really good with the sword in the books, and then like ultimately we find out like none of that sword play matters because he's just Tavern or whatever. So it's like if there's gonna be a great sword fight in the Wheel of Time, it's probably not gonna be Rand al'Thor as one of the fighters.
Mm. Well, he uses the sword, or practicing the sword, as a means of finding the void, to comfort himself, to escape from the reality in which he finds himself. I mean, I think we can all pretty much find some, kind of sense in that, because I mean, I play basketball, and I love it. And when I'm on the court, the world is essentially that rectangular shape and the two hoops, and the people on the court with me, and nothing exists beyond that, as it were. So I mean, I can completely understand why a troubled character such as Rand would find so much solace in practicing the sword. So we need to see him do it.
Yeah, it's funny because they said that all the actors participated in martial arts training. So it wasn't just Rand. It's not necessarily like who's good at sword play in the books is getting the practice in the cast. Like the showrunners, for whatever reason, have been training everybody and everything. So I do think that combat is going to come to these characters more in the future. I just don't know. It's gonna have to be part of the story somehow, and it can't just be gratuitous like the ale woman in the show. I guess she's
Shael, was it?
Shael, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if they reveal the like it's so weird because people keep on referencing the characters and places and things in the show with book information, and I'm like, they never say that in the show though. So can we actually say her name is Shael when I don't have my subtitles on?
Yeah, but it has to be, right? Because I mean, Tam al'Thor is the one who takes the child, so it can't be anyone else, I guess.
But like Rand's horse coming out of the two rivers in the show, Rand is riding a horse, and the horse is taking him out of the two rivers. In the books, the name of the horse is Cloud, and then in the show we never get that information. But the horse has to be Cloud. Like there's only one horse that could be, and that's Cloud.
Mm.
So it's confusing sometimes to hear people reference things, and I'm like, did they say that? Like, when did they say that? What was this? What was the shot? What was the dialogue? What was the episode? Who was the character?
Well, the only horse that they decided had to be mentioned was Bella, for some reason. Now, Bella stays with us for a long time. And so therefore there seems to be a serious horse following in the fandom for Bella. But I mean, another factor of the story, which I thought was fantastic, maybe because it was so short, as it were, with regards to time span, was the arrival of these people by boat at the end. How did you feel about that? I mean, were you expecting it for a start?
I don't think I was expecting that at all. Maybe I saw. It's weird for me because I often will see. That would have been impossible. I would not have been able to see spoilers for the last scene of the last episode before the episode aired. So I had to have seen it live in the show. I don't like as soon as it happened, I knew exactly who they were. I was more surprised to see a little girl. Like personally, I was like, "Whoa, what little girl? Like, who's this? I don't remember this happening." And then once I saw the boats, I was like, "Oh, I know enough. Now I'm relaxed again. I know exactly." Even though that little girl's dead, but
Mm. Well, is she? I mean, did she die?
I guess she didn't die on screen, but it seemed to imply that
Mm. But that's
she.
not consistent with what we know of this.
That's true.
Oh, do you want to mention the names? It's okay to mention the names. Yeah,
Oh,
the
yeah, sure. It's your podcast. Talk the
yeah,
Sean.
no. Sean Shan. Let's say it. What the hell? Yeah. Even though whenever I read it, it's Sian Shan, but I know it's Sean Shan. Yeah. Yeah. We know these people are not bloodthirsty in the sense that they just arrive in an environment and kill everyone. They ask them, "Are you true to the oaths? Or have you
Yeah,
taken the oaths? And then are you true to the oaths?" Um, and if somebody takes the oaths, and then that's it, they're free to go about their business. So I mean, it's not necessarily the case that the people on the beach die, is it?
that's true. I really don't know what to expect.
Hmm.
I was excited to see like their cool costumes and their cool boats, and to see more channeling. Uh, I guess I didn't. I knew, like, I was like, we're at the end of the episode. Nothing is going to come of this. They're just teasing it. I knew it was a
Hmm.
teaser. That's how I sort of accepted it. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, yeah, they got the costumes, they got all the looks and the terrangrial and all the cool stuff. So
Hmm. What is your? I mean, because you also allude to it in the notes here. What is your take on the Damani and the Suldam um, within the story, from what we know of it, of course, and also the reputation of people who can channel generally in certain places. What do you think about that particular sort of culture that the Shanshan represent?
from what we know of, again, I look at the Wheel of Time very schematically. So what we have is the center landmass, and then we have the surrounding land masses, or and I guess the sea folk too. So we get Ale, sea folk, the land of madmen, the Sharans, and then the Shan Chan. And each one of the cultures deals with their channelers differently. So the Shan Chan were just one um, like one component of the schematic. And so I didn't really think of them like, oh, I hate them so much. They're slavers, and like that really didn't factor into my mind at all. When I thought about Tawan specifically, a lot of people are like, she represents slavery, and for me, it doesn't. That doesn't factor into, like, there's no. I don't make a moral judgment about the character of Tawan based on the society she comes from or this faction she comes from. It's perfectly all right to me. It's just uh, more drama to shovel into the mix.
Hmm. I mean, what strikes me also is quite interesting, and whether this was also sort of inherent in Robert Jordan's notes that he left for Brandon Sanderson, or whether Brandon Sanderson decided to include this in his internal speech for Rand. When Rand was considering the area that belonged or was under the banner of the dragon, where there were people who were starving, there was no discipline, um, and that essentially he had created that or allowed for that situation to develop. Whereas when he went then to Ebu Dar and saw how society was under the control of the Shanshan, and he sort of marveled at the fact that there was peace, there was prosperity, there was food. Um, People seemed to be living quite well within that. Um, and he was very critical of himself, the sort of internal speech. How do you take that representation of this? Because I mean, you've considered it totalitarian with regards to the Shanshan, um, and yet the people seemed quite happy. That's an interesting sort of contradiction, isn't it?
I really think that the Dark One very specifically was out to get in Rand's head, and this is one example of it working extremely well. One of his lieutenants, or one of his champions, very much had a hand in his in Rand's perception of uh,
Yeah,
Bandar Eben is
Bandar
where
Eban. Mhm.
all that poverty was. Um, and the thing is, like, Rand stepped in and was like, "Hey, I came back one more time and helped you out one more time," but then he kept on going to all of his lieutenants and being like, "I can't be here every time. We need to start figuring out how to get things done without me being there." Uh, and you saw that with the meeting. I mean, they had a big meeting at the end of the book series before the last battle started, and it wasn't about this hard total control framework surrounding and protecting everyone. It was about an agreement, like everyone comes to the table, everyone shakes hands, and we all walk away with a certain level of responsibility. Whereas if you walk into the Shan Chan's conquered realms, there's very much a sense from the citizenry, like, we aren't ultimately responsible for anything. Like, nothing, like, I own my business, but I'm not ultimately responsible for my business. Um, and this whole idea of like, oh, there's the blood, and they're walking down the street, and there's something fundamentally different about them, and that's they are responsible. Like, they not they own my business, but like my business exists for and like of them.
Mm.
And once you get to the end of the series and you show what Rand's plan comes to in the end, you really get this sense that once this new age begins, there's tremendous possibility for, you know, this exceptional move towards industrialization, which is kind of where everyone is moving in the series. It's like we're right at the cusp of becoming industrial, and I think Rand's plan works a lot better than the Shan Chan's plan.
Mm. But then, I mean, it's convenient for us, obviously, to say that, even though we're also aware of one of the possible future visions that Avienda has, that things don't necessarily work out that way either.
Yeah, Avienda's visions are pretty apocalyptic seeming
Mm.
for some of our friends, and then really progressive seeming for some of the people we don't like very much. But she ends up. We know that that future isn't true because she steps up at Rand's meeting
Mm.
and says something.
Yeah. she's also quite. She isn't very outspoken. She's very analytical. She keeps, and she's very disciplined. She doesn't say too much when she could say stuff, but she tends to be very direct in her speech. I find her a very um, powerful character, but also very economical with regards to the amount of time she takes up and what she achieves in that small amount of time. Do you think they're going to do this four-way thing? We don't have to mention the individuals involved. You know what I'm talking about. Do you think they're going
Yeah.
to go through with that?
I've heard that they're going to make it instead of everyone together, it's going to be one after another.
Okay.
Like the main character goes through a series of relationships over the course of the series.
Okay.
I don't think I. It's not absolutely necessary for Rand to have the same relationships, but everyone from the books, I think, should be included. And I mean, we already have a lot of casting announcements, so it seems that a certain amount is going to happen.
I mean, he's already had a physical encounter with Egwene, which is also contrary to the books. I mean, it doesn't. I don't have to highlight that fact, but I mean, in itself, that's quite interesting.
Brandon, I think that can only be good for the show and for the fandom, because shipping is one, in my opinion, shipping is one of the main pillars of fandoming. Like, you have to have relationships and you have to have the fans want people to be together, even if they're not supposed to be together. And
Okay.
that's a really clear relationship that fans can pick up and support. And then other fans are like, that can't happen, it won't happen, it shouldn't happen. And that is good, because there's a conflict there that's fun for fans to engage in.
Yeah, I mean, I have to also say, when Rand encounters a specific person in the White Tower, when he reveals his intentions to her, I think this particular physical element, it's a kind of good background to that. And I really hope they're going to keep that meeting that happens later on in the story, because the tension that is referred to, experienced by the Amelin, I can say that at least, we've got some background to that now.
That is really interesting. It's weird because in the books, Rand meets the Amerlin in Faldera, but I don't think that's going to happen in the show. It can't happen in the show.
Well, yeah. He's not there anymore, is he? So
that meeting and then re-meeting, because he gets to see her when she's at the height of her power.
Yeah, we're talking about different Amelins here.
Yeah. Yeah. That Amerlin, when is he gonna meet her? I mean, we know that Camelin is a location in season 2, so.
No, that's not that Amelin either.
Oh, great. I guess he's gonna meet her at the height of her power later on too.
Yeah.
So many Amerlins.
Yeah, but you see what I mean about that, the background to that final meeting.
I get what you're trying to say. Is he gonna be like, I know who you are, I don't think that's gonna factor in. I don't think Rand would do that because he obviously really loves Egwene in the books, and he obviously really loves Egwene in the show. But we've
Mm.
already seen Rand say things that he didn't mean to Egwene in the show.
But he's
And
at peace with himself, though, when he meets her. It's her insides that are, you know,
fluttering.
exploding. Yeah. Maybe that's the Tavern, or I don't know. But
I
you
think
know,
at that point in time, Rand was just super hot. He was
yeah,
super
he
hot.
was, wasn't he? Yeah. All of the Aes Sedai were. I can't believe you kept your cool the way that you did. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works out with all of these Aes Sedai, these powerful beings, and then almost sort of shaking or quivering as Rand strides past.
There's a few times in the books when Rand's like, you know, I could just force you to do whatever I want by bending the pattern to my will right now. Like I can just control it and make you do things. And then a number of times, very powerful minded people were like, no, like, no, you can't. I'm still me. You can bend the pattern around yourself, but I'm still me.
I tell it, the more I think about it, there's just so much to look forward to in this developing saga. Um, yeah, let's move on a little bit to the Twitter of time, general fandom. Um, it's up and down really for me, because I see lots of people coming together. I see you are a prime example of somebody who really welcomes sort of new members and newcomers to the fandom. Um, but I also see lots and lots of others do so as well. But then there are other occasions when people seem to say things which are taken, perhaps the beyond the intentions that they initially represented, and there's quite a bit of toxicity there. Do you think that's normal in a fandom, or do you think with Wheel of Time it's a little bit exaggerated?
I think the Wheel of Time has a few identity problems where they're trying to project an identity on themselves when,
The
in my
fans,
opinion,
the fans, you mean?
the fans are projecting an identity on themselves as a fandom very often. Like, this is who we are. This is who we are. I don't really think that's necessary for in what I would term success. We can have, many different kinds of identities. Like some people could have a bad interaction with some fans, and I would hope that that doesn't reflect on everyone. And I mean, I'm really nice to people, and sometimes I'm really mean to people, and I really try to mix it up as much as I can so that no, no one can be like, this is exactly who this person is. Like, I don't want to be exactly anyone. I want to be different all the time. And the only thing that's going to be consistent about my Twitter account is the fact that I keep on posting everything under the hashtag from the the show account. So I don't know.
Okay. And is that with the article or without? I keep forgetting. Is it the Wheel of Time or is it Wheel of Time? I
The
always.
same. It's the same as the official Twitter handle of the show, which is the Wheel of Time.
Okay.
So there is a handle that is without the article at Wheel of Time, and you can tell that this person is trying to sell the handle to either Brandon Sanderson or Harriet McDougal. Like the
Uh-huh.
last tweet from the account is like, hey, if any, like, I'm trying to give this to people, but they're not coming into contact with me, and that's in like 2016. So at Wheel of Time, last tweet was in 2016, but the hashtag Wheel of Time is like not as popular as the the Wheel of Time.
Mm.
But it's still splitting the promotional. Uh, I can't think of the word. We have a certain amount of potential as a
Mm.
fandom, and I think that confusing the hashtags we use really puts a damper on our ability to promote the show and get our brand across to new fans.
You mentioned this last week as well, in the episode that won't be published because of my audio, faux pas. But they're like the show. They also did contributed to this mess, didn't they? Because you mentioned that they had the hashtag LAN, hashtag Moraine, hashtag Egwene,
Yeah.
and that essentially it was too. There are too many hashtags connected to the show, is what you were saying.
Well, now the hash they paid for hash flags, which are the little emojis that happen after the hashtag, but that's not in circulation anymore.
Okay.
We have no hash flags at the moment because that's a paid promotion that the company has to pay for. So
Okay.
hopefully next season, when we pay for our hash flags, we will focus on one hashtag and give the hash flag to that. I mean, the little sort of, I don't they're almost like chibi emojis that we got for the characters were fun, but I don't know, because it's a link to content. If you want to see hot pictures of Daniel Henney, then you can hashtag LAN, hashtag LAN. And that should bring up hot pictures of Daniel Henney in his LAN costume. I mean, if I clicked on LAN, that's what I would hope to find. It's like
Mm.
pictures of him, videos of him, like memes, uh, what like quotes. I would hope that it would bring me to content related to that character.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, I don't recall having really set about tweeting these name tags of the main characters because, I mean, where would you start? I mean, my favorite character, Matt. Unfortunately, his character has had to go through a certain amount of variance in that from season 2 on he's going to be represented by a different character or a different actor, which I don't have a problem with. It is what it is at the end of the day. I mean, I don't think that's going to affect the story in any way, shape, or form. Um, but how do you see the story developing? Because as far as I'm aware, when Rafe hasn't simply thought about the first 2, 3, or 4 seasons, he's actually plotted the entire story for however many seasons that he has planned. So for him, with the exception of episodes 7 and 8, because apparently the issues with Barney Harris, who plays Matt, and also the Corona pandemic played a bit of havoc with their planning. So they had to improvise a little bit. But still, I mean, he's got all of his storylines set out already. Not just him, but also what's the name of Sarah McNamara, yeah, or Nakamura? Nakamura?
Nakamura.
Nakamura, yeah. So,
Yes.
these two have basically got the whole story already, and they're just going to sort of go ahead with it. Um, yeah, I mean,
My understanding of their relationship is Rafe uh, has a structure that he's designed that he hasn't filled it in yet. And
okay,
he makes requests to Nakamura for book content. So he says, I want this to happen as far as the episode. We start here, we end here. So I need you to find the content from the book to fill in the in between bits. And so first off, she'll look at what Rafe has written and say, like, this is possible, like we can do this. Or she'll say, this is impossible, you can't do that because it doesn't work. And then he'll have to come up with a new structure, like he'll rough draft it, and then she'll fill it in, and then they'll work on future drafts together.
Okay, but they've already done this. Is it to a great extent? This has already been accomplished because
I think there's a lot of more work that has to be done. From what I've heard described, there's a lot more work that's going to have to be done for every single season. They only
okay,
have a vague outline of what they want to accomplish, and it's based on the plot points in the books. So they're like, very vaguely, we want to cover these major plot points in the final season. And then I think what I've heard is they have a set of plot points that can fill either, if we have 10 seasons, seasons 8 and 9, or if we have 8 seasons, season 7. So it's like once you get to the end game of the books, they could easily fill in more seasons with more plot from the
sure,
books, or they could hack it off at 8 seasons. And then each season is the same way. So even if Judkins would have rather 10 episodes for the first season, or if the first episode was 3 hours long instead of one, he has the plot points to shove into each season, and he can expand it out as much as he wants. But it seems like there's these milestones that he has envisions for each season already, if
mm,
not the entire season written out.
yeah. I mean, I guess obviously the financial budget is I mean it's very high, but there's still a budget, so I mean they can't just do 20 episodes for a season. But I guess also there is a certain amount of consideration towards the actors' careers, that they have to dedicate more or less, I suppose, 8 seasons of preparations and then promotions to this whole thing, and thereafter, fandom conferences and people coming together. So I mean, I guess they can't create on a limited number of seasons because the actors have got their own careers as well. I mean, if I sign up to be a character, if I'm like a Trolloc, then I can't be a Trolloc for the next 20 years. I want to do something else, I would imagine. And so these people must be the same, I guess.
I've heard about Daniel Henney signing a contract for 2 years, and it must be exactly that. They can't have all of these actors signed up for 8 years already. They have to be negotiating for whatever they can get.
Mm.
So as far as, like, I followed the human resources sort of person for the Wheel of Time, and she likes to promote the projects her talent is involved in. And it seems like the cast is well represented and is being looked after. And I think if we get to see all 8 seasons of the Wheel of Time or more, the cast is going to be well compensated and given the freedom to explore their careers outside of the Wheel of Time.
Mm-hmm. No. Okay. All right. And one final question, though it's a little bit convoluted. Amazon, fantastic productions. I'm not going to talk about their employment rules and the reputation that they have with regards to that, because it would be far too inconvenient to put that into this particular appreciation show for one of their products. They've got a prequel trilogy of movies. They've got The Ring of Power. They've got The Wheel of Time. They're obviously heavily invested in the genre. What do you think the strategy is? Yeah, it's almost like a never-ending supply. I mean, they've got at least the next 8 to 9 years more or less tied up with regards to this genre. Just with all of that. Yeah, why?
To increase the subscriptions to Prime. More and more people need to subscribe to Prime every single year to make the company successful. Like, the company can't be successful on its own terms without an ever increasing number of subscriptions. And there has to be some sort of computation happening, like we can throw this much money in there and then we get this many subscriptions back from it. And it seems to be the Wheel of Time, at least from what I've seen, seems to have changed the way people look at Amazon Prime. Because before, in my opinion, before the Wheel of Time, I didn't really see anything exciting except for Jack Ryan,
and yeah.
For me, before Jack Ryan, there was no Amazon Prime, and after Jack Ryan, I was like, this is a real thing. But then I saw Jack Ryan season 2, and it wasn't as good as the first one.
Okay.
So I was like, they need new stuff all the time, and it can't just be the Wheel of Time. It has to be an ever increasing number of options for people to watch in order to get those subscriptions up.
Have you not seen Bosch?
I should. I haven't seen it.
Okay. Bosch is brilliant. All of the characters are fantastic. It's not just Titus Welliver, it's all of them. They're fantastic.
My whole life is the Wheel of
Time. Okay, fair enough. All right, yeah. Drab, you've been a great sport to come back again. I mean, we changed the discussion this week, but thank you very much. It was great for you to have you back again, but also just to do me the favor of coming back, considering I'd screwed up the audio. So thank you for that too.
All right, it was great being here, Zach. I hope to be on your show again in the future. Good night.
2 and a mic.